Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Tales of the Bizarre Season 2 Part 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The 37th story begins with a young phony psychic appearing at a funeral. He approached a crying woman, telling her that the dead cannot be resurrected and urging her to accept her loss. He remarked that the greatest pain in the world is losing a loved one and asked if she had any regrets, things she wished she had said but now couldn't. The psychic claimed he had been possessed by a mysterious power since childhood, granting him the ability to glimpse into the underworld. After decades of rigorous training, he had perfected his abilities and could now facilitate communication between the living and the dead. To help people with regrets find peace, he opened a business called Hell Mailbox. He offered his services for a fee, of course, explaining that as the saying goes, money makes the world go round even in the underworld, as he needed to bribe various entities for information. And believe it or not, ever since he started advertising, he discovered that a vast number of people were burdened with regret. Naturally, the psychic was more than happy to take their money. One day, a beautiful young woman sought his help, wanting to send a message to her deceased fiancé. The psychic was shocked when he saw a photo of the couple, as they seemed completely mismatched. The woman explained that they were from the same village. The greasy man came from a wealthy family, while hers was modest. She was an excellent student but couldn't afford university. The man, who adored her, offered to pay for her education, treating her as his future wife. At first, she didn't like him at all, but over 3 years, his constant care and the allure of his wealth led her to accept him. It wasn't love, but she had grown accustomed to him. Shortly after she graduated, he proposed. Not long after that, however, he was killed in a car accident. Lying on the operating table in his final moments, he insisted on seeing her. He warned her that even in death, she would still be his. Anyone who made a move on her would have to die, and she was never to betray him. After uttering these words with all his strength, he passed away. The woman, however, had no desire to live as a widow for him. She came to the psychic to return the engagement ring and to tell her late fiancé that he was a good person, but she was the one who had wronged him. She also wished him well, hoping he would find someone better in the afterlife. The story was a bit cliché and melodramatic, but the psychic was just there to do a paid job. He relayed her message to the dead, adding that it wasn't the man's fault he died so young. After the woman left, the psychic immediately went to a pawn shop to sell the ring. But the pawnbroker was even greedier than he was, offering only $10,000. With no other choice, the psychic took the ring home, snatching a pot of flowers on his way out. He secretly left the flowers and a letter for the woman. The next day, she returned to give him a glowing review. She said her fiancé had replied, saying he understood her feelings, wished her happiness, and thanked her for the flowers. The psychic was delighted, telling her she could now start a new life. However, she added that her fiancé mentioned the flowers were marigold, which symbolized jealousy, and that they were an inappropriate gift. The psychic panicked slightly. He had just grabbed them randomly and had no idea about their meaning. Before he could explain, the woman continued. A colleague had always been fond of her, and she had used her fiancé as an excuse to reject him. A few days ago, after learning of her fiancé's death, the colleague began calling her frequently. Unable to refuse, she had a few meals with him. Shortly after, the man mysteriously died. The woman suspected her deceased fiancé was responsible. The psychic, being a scammer who didn't believe in the supernatural, dismissed it. He reassured her it was just a coincidence. But then she mentioned that a senior from her university also had feelings for her and had been asking her out persistently. Feeling she couldn't refuse any longer, she planned to accept his invitation for that evening. The psychic immediately vetoed the idea, warning her against such a dangerous risk. He said while it might have been a coincidence before, it was better to be safe than sorry. Secretly, he thought that such a beautiful woman shouldn't be wasted on someone else. He told her not to worry and that he would take care of her admirer the next day. However, when the psychic went to the university, he learned that the senior had also died the previous day. The psychic didn't think much of it at first, but then he had a bizarre fall outside the school that nearly killed him. Just then, his car phone rang. It was the woman calling for help. Without a second thought, he rushed to her home. The moment he walked in, she threw her sexy arms around him, making his heart pound. She explained that her neighbor, a shop owner, had harassed her earlier that day, and moments later, the man dropped dead like a piece of shit. Terrified and not knowing who else to call, she had contacted him. She asked if he minded, and of course he didn't. He even offered to stay and comfort her using his muscles, the kind of hands-on comfort that made him feel worse than an animal. He stayed until the middle of the night. Figuring he should go home and not rush things, he replaced his hand with a doll and slipped away. On the way home, his thoughts were still on the woman when he suddenly realized his brakes weren't working. If not for an obstacle ahead that cushioned the impact, he would have died on the spot. After calming down, he recalled the day's events and the fiancé's dying words. The psychic realized it was all true. The man was keeping his promise. Worried for the woman, he sprinted back to her house. At that moment, the woman seemed to be having a nightmare, muttering in her sleep. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open. The fear and confusion were gone, replaced by the look of a completely different person. She walked slowly toward the balcony. Just as she was about to do something, the psychic burst in. Upon seeing him, her expression instantly reverted to its previous state. The psychic, not noticing the change, rushed to apologize. He confessed that he was a fraud and that the hell mailbox was all a lie. He tried to return the ring, explaining that while he had deceived her, her fiancé's warning might be real. But he promised to make up for his lies by protecting her for the rest of his life. He then embraced her using his muscles, but she told him that when he gets to her fiancé's side, he shouldn't forget to tell him to watch over her happiness from heaven. The psychic was stunned, not understanding what she meant. When he turned, he saw her raise a sharp object and kill him. The story ends here. The fiancé's warning was a lie. The woman was the killer all along. She had killed all the men who got close to her. As for her motive, she had mentioned her happiness twice. She craved happiness, but these men couldn't give her the kind she wanted. In her own words, they kept asking her out, and she found it hard to refuse. Since she couldn't turn them down, her only solution was to eliminate them. It's likely her fiancé met the same fate. In short, the woman was dangerously disturbed. The 38th story begins with a man who was on the verge of a promotion. The company's top executive was his future father-in-law, yet he wasn't happy. In fact, he was deeply troubled. He had never even met his fiancée. He didn't know what she looked like and often fantasized about her appearance, but his boss was so protective he wouldn't even show him a photo. The man was, by all accounts, a genuinely nice guy, the kind who couldn't say no. He was a people pleaser, and this arranged marriage was no exception. Though he didn't want to get married, he went along with it because his future father-in-law was his superior. Over the years, because of his agreeable nature, the man had dated quite a few women. However, the quality of these girlfriends was inconsistent, to put it mildly. They were all rather unattractive. Those were just flings, but now that things were serious, he worried about his future wife's appearance. He yearned to date a beautiful woman, even just once. That night at home, he received a call from his fiancée. Though they'd never met, they often spoke on the phone. From her voice, she sounded gentle and sweet, but he knew plenty of people with pleasant voices who were not so pleasant to look at. She tasked him with choosing the rings. While chatting with her, he felt something odd and looked up to see water dripping from the ceiling. A hole had appeared in his roof, and through it, he could not only see water, but also clearly hear a conversation from upstairs. He heard a woman's maniacal laughter and a man's chicken scream. It seemed like his eavesdropping had been discovered. Terrified, he called the building manager, an old man who walked with great difficulty. He told him about the situation, but the manager was confused, stating that the apartment above had been vacant for a long time. Seeing his disbelief, the manager unlocked the door for him. Inside, a thick layer of dust confirmed his story. The man also noticed that the dripping hole had vanished. In his confusion, he spotted a ring on the floor. Urged by the manager, he left, and the rest of the night passed without incident. The next day, the man went to choose a wedding ring but couldn't find one he liked. Then he remembered the ring he'd found the night before. For some reason, the moment he saw it, he was satisfied with its design. He took it out and asked the clerk to find a matching one. That evening, with the ring in his pocket, he went to a bar. He had expected to finally meet his fiancée, but she had to cancel because her best friend needed her. As the man sat there feeling lost, he was approached by an attractive young woman. He had never been hit on by such a beautiful woman before, and his heart fluttered. They hit it off immediately, and after many drinks, she went home with him. After a passionate but fast night, the man was overjoyed, feeling his life was finally complete. Even if he had to walk into the prison of marriage the next day, he felt he could die without regrets. But then the woman suddenly asked if he had a girlfriend. The man flinched and immediately said no. The woman smiled and warned that if he was lying, she would kill him. The man laughed nervously. Just then, the phone rang. He pulled on his pants and answered. It was his fiancée apologizing for not being able to meet. The man reassured her it was fine, feeling quite pleased with how his night had turned out. As he spoke, he noticed something strange on the floor. A hole had appeared, just like the one before. Looking through it, he was horrified to see himself from the previous day. In a flash, the man understood everything. Startled, he knocked over a cup of tea, and the liquid dripped through the hole onto the hymn below. He then watched as the woman walked towards him with a knife, letting out a familiar maniacal laugh. The man could only accept his fate in despair. The story ends there. What the man had witnessed before was his own future. But then again, without knowing the outcome, it's hard to see how he could have avoided it. The 39th story begins at the breakfast table, where a girl cried softly while her brother and mother sat in somber silence. The sound of a toilet flushing broke the stillness. The three of them stopped and turned in unison to look at a man who sat down at the table after shouting a few greetings. His presence startled the cat and stunned the three people before him. There was no place setting for him. The girl suddenly asked where her father's meal was. The woman, flustered, apologized and quickly brought him a bowl and chopsticks. But as the man began to eat, the other three put down their own chopsticks and watched him intently, as if afraid that if they looked away, they would never see him again. The man ate quickly, finishing in moments. Noticing they were still staring, he asked why they weren't eating. He commented that while the food wasn't great, it shouldn't be wasted. He then asked his wife for tea and his daughter for his medicine. Just then, a gust of wind blew a newspaper off a nearby table. The woman quickly snatched it up and stuffed it into the sink, as if trying to hide it from the man. A headline on the paper read in bold letters, "Death from overwork." Seeing this, the woman was overcome with grief. The boy, fearing she would cry out, rushed to comfort her. The man, oblivious, noted the nice weather and suggested taking his daughter for a walk. She refused, saying she didn't want to go out, she just wanted to hug him. She held him for a long time, and when she finally let go, her face was streaked with tears. The man gently asked what was wrong. The question was the final straw for the woman, who broke down into loud sobs. The girl ran to her, scolding her and saying that if she acted like this, their father would find out. If he knew, he would disappear again. But as she spoke, the girl herself began to cry. The man listened for a while and finally understood. They were talking about his death. He found a mirror and looked into it. Sure enough, he had no reflection. Suddenly, he remembered that he was in fact dead, like a piece of walking shit. Upon realizing this, the man's entire presence seemed to deflate. He collapsed to the floor, unable to speak, and then vanished. After he was gone, the cat returned. The three family members stared blankly at the spot where he had been, silent. If not for the half-empty teacup on the table, the entire experience would have felt like a dream, so surreal. Of course, this might have all been a hallucination, born from their intense grief. The 40th story begins with a young student cramming for his college entrance exams, but he was incredibly anxious. To him, his review notes looked like gibberish. He was a classic case of 11th hour panic. Unable to study any longer, he decided to go out for a late-night snack to feed his brain. Coincidentally, he ran into an old man selling soup. The old man's sales pitch was bold: drink his soup and you'll instantly become smarter. The student was curious and asked if the soup contained some kind of brain-boosting supplement. The old man smiled mysteriously and said it was even more potent. The student saw that he even offered an Einstein-flavored brain soup, which claimed to make the drinker as smart as Einstein, but it cost $1 million. The student scoffed, noticing an Edison version for $100,000. He teased the old man, asking what kind of fool would buy such a thing. The old man, unbothered, replied that he wasn't forcing him to buy. Finding the old man interesting, the student asked if there was anything cheaper. The old man said yes, for just $100. The student laughed, questioning if something so cheap could possibly be effective. The old man assured him it was, but with a small side effect. While you'd get smarter, your character might take a bit of a nosedive. The student laughed again. Facing the prospect of failing his exams, he couldn't care less about his character. Besides, who knew if this stuff even worked? Since he was buying a snack anyway, he bought a bowl of soup from the old man. What he didn't know was that after he left, the old man was overjoyed, speaking to a photo of a deceased person named Shinbara, congratulating him on finally making a sale. Back home, the student drank the soup. If nothing else, it tasted good. For the next few days, he continued to drink it. Soon, the day of the exam arrived. The student sat in the exam hall, still completely lost. But suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, mocking him for not being able to solve such simple problems. The initial shock gave way to excitement. He realized the old man hadn't been lying. The voice was genuinely helping him answer the questions. With this divine assistance, he successfully passed and got into his dream university. On the day the results were posted, he was ecstatic. Running home, he didn't notice a photograph on the ground he had stepped on. The person in the photo was Shinbara, the man whose voice was in his head. Next to it was a piece of paper detailing his age, personality, and cause of death. When the student got home, he received a package containing an invitation from his best friend from his hometown. His friend was getting married and insisted he attend. However, at the wedding, he was controlled by Shinbara's consciousness. With no filter, he caused a massive scene. He declared the groom a complete hypocrite who had faked his academic credentials, had a habit of stealing, and got into college through his parents' connections. He then called the bride a promiscuous woman who had had over 50 abortions. Naturally, he was thrown out, and his friendship was over. While drinking alone and grumbling, two large men sat down next to him. His brain acted up again, and he insulted them. These men didn't tolerate it and gave him a severe beating. Lying on the ground, the student was miserable, just as he had been before his exams. He couldn't understand why, despite becoming smarter, his life was falling apart. He also hadn't anticipated the side effect, his poor character, would be this extreme. Just then, he saw the soup vendor again. He asked the old man if it was too late to drink a different soup and get a new brain. The old man told him it was, because some habits once formed are impossible to break. Unless, he added, the student could dig out his own brain. With that, he left the student in despair. The story ends there, a lesson about the price of a bargain. The note mentioned that Shinbara had committed suicide. It was likely because his terrible personality made life unbearable, or perhaps he had literally dug out his own brain. The 41st story begins with Takashi arriving at work one morning to an incredible opportunity. The company president told him that his only daughter had fallen in love with him at first sight and was determined to marry him. The president, who also thought highly of Takashi, said that if he agreed, the top position in the company would one day be his. The old man wasn't rushing him, giving him a few days to consider the life-changing proposal. Takashi remained calm on the surface, but inwardly he was ecstatic. There was just one problem. He had a girlfriend of 3 years, Hana. How could he break up with her and get her out of his life? Hana was beautiful, kind, and virtuous, which made the thought of breaking up with her unbearable. That night, he met a friend to discuss the situation. He explained everything and asked for advice. His friend remarked that Hana was a wonderful, gentle, and understanding person. As for the rich man's daughter, he'd never met her, but based on TV dramas, she was probably a spoiled and unreasonable heiress. In the end, the choice was Takashi's to make, weighing the pros and cons. A chance to get ahead in life versus a supportive and loving partner. It was a tough decision, but Takashi chose ambition. Since breaking up was too difficult, he decided he would have to kill her. But doing it now would surely make him a suspect. He was once again trapped in indecision. Then, he encountered a mysterious wise man. The man seemed to see right through him, noting Takashi's impoverished childhood had made him desperate to seize any opportunity for success. Takashi was amazed and begged the man for guidance. The man said the solution was simple. He led Takashi to a Tesla motorcycle, explaining it was a time machine. All he had to do was ride it back to when Hana was a child and eliminate her then. No one would ever suspect him, and since he would never have met her, his path to success would be clear. Takashi thought it made perfect sense and immediately rode the motorcycle into the past. Using a childhood photo of Hana, he successfully found her as a little girl. He followed her, looking for the right moment to strike. However, instead of finding an opportunity, he was discovered by her. Takashi managed to win her trust by correctly stating her age, birthday, blood type, family members, and the fact that she had a mole on her stomach. She followed him to a riverbank. As Takashi was about to make his move, Hana suddenly said she understood. She had mistaken him for a talent scout, thinking his knowledge of her was part of an investigation. She told him she didn't want to be a child star yet. She needed to focus on her studies. With that, she left. Takashi was furious with himself for forgetting his mission. Just then, he heard cries for help. Following the sound, he saw that Hana had fallen into the river. His first instinct was to save her, but then he remembered his boss's offer, the wise man's words, and the purpose of his trip. If Hana drowned, his problem would be solved without him having to do a thing. He hesitated, deciding to walk away. As her cries for help grew fainter, Takashi's conscience got the better of him. He couldn't bear it and went back to save her. The moment she clung to him, he burst into tears, repeatedly reassuring her that everything was okay. Hana was saved, but he caught a cold. He had also completely forgotten his mission. He wandered into a familiar alley, one he frequented after school as a child. He remembered how a single coin made him feel like a king back then. People are never satisfied, he thought. At that moment, he saw his younger self. He remembered his love for curry and how happy he would be whenever his mom made it for dinner. Watching his past self, tears streamed down his face. He thought of Hana and the 3 years of care she had given him, how she often made his favorite curry. And yet, he had planned to kill her for a promotion. He felt like he wasn't even human. In that instant, Takashi knew what he truly needed. The ride back was a happy one. Though his mission had failed, he had finally learned to cherish what he had. A few days later, Takashi met Hana's parents. They were very pleased with him and set a wedding date. The two found themselves by the same river. Hana told him that as a child, she had almost drowned there but was saved by an older boy who left without giving his name. From that day on, she vowed to marry someone as kind as him. Afterward, the couple laughed and played, preparing to leave. They didn't notice the wise man watching them from a distance. He gave a slight nod as if satisfied, then rode away on his motorcycle. The 42nd story begins with a man moving into a new apartment. On the wall was a large mirror that, according to the building manager, was quite old and could be considered a semi-antique. Although it looked a bit out of place, the man needed a mirror, so he didn't ask for it to be removed. But when he tried to move it, he found he couldn't budge it, as if it were nailed to the wall. He then discovered a small switch beneath it. Curious, he turned it. In the next instant, the reflection of a beautiful woman appeared in the mirror. Startled, the man looked around but found she only existed within the mirror, like watching a television. After the woman left the frame, the man noticed a calendar in her room. It's the year 1989. He turned to look at his own calendar, 1991. Confused, he turned the switch again. This time, the scene changed to a long-haired man playing rock music. Another turn revealed a married couple, and their calendar read 1981, 10 years ago. At this point, the man began to understand. The mirror could store and replay images from the room's past. To confirm his theory, he went downstairs to ask the manager about the previous tenants. The manager recalled that before the man, there was a young girl, before her, a rock musician, and before him, a married couple. He couldn't remember any further back. Realizing the mirror could play back the past, the man began marking the switch positions to correspond with different time periods. From then on, he had a new hobby, sitting in front of the mirror every day. Over a few days, he learned the routine of the girl in the mirror. Home at 7 p.m., lights out at midnight, up at 7 a.m. Occasionally, the view would be quite titillating, and he'd find himself drooling. Gradually, the man felt like he was falling in love with her. He took many photos of her beautiful moments with his camera. One day, he saw a man trying to forcibly kiss the girl, which infuriated him. Thankfully, she managed to stop him. Just then, his friends arrived for drinks. After they left, the man was cleaning up and idly turned the switch to 1981, hoping for another show. Instead, he witnessed the married couple arguing. To his horror, he then saw the husband murder his wife. The man was terrified. The thought that a murder had occurred in this very room, right where he was standing, filled him with fear. The next day, the man went to the library to check the archives for that year, but found no news of the crime. When he asked the manager again, the manager vaguely remembered that the woman in that couple had supposedly cheated on her husband and ran off with another man. The case was never pursued. The murder had gone undiscovered for a decade, with everyone assuming she had left in shame. It was a perfect crime. Shaken, he covered the mirror and stopped watching. However, a few days later, while out shopping, he spotted the guy from that memory. Though his hair was now white, he recognized the guy instantly. He began to follow him but lost him around a corner. Desperate, he went to a phone booth and called the police, claiming he had witnessed a murder in a mirror. The police on the other end cursed him out. Defeated, he went home, unaware that the man had overheard his entire conversation with the police. Back in his apartment, the man set up a video camera to record the mirror's playback. But when he turned the switch, he found the image wouldn't change. Not only that, but a new image appeared, a terrified version of himself. In the reflection, he saw himself backing away in fear as the man entered his apartment. Then, to his real-life horror, he watched the reflection of the man kill his reflected self. Just then, his doorbell rang. He peered through the peephole in terror. Sure enough, the man was there to kill him. The 43rd story begins with Morishita, an ordinary office worker who had a crush on a woman from another company named Mikawa. He kept asking her out to the movies, but she always turned him down. This time, her excuse was that her sister was about to give birth and she had to take care of her. Morishita knew this was a lie, as Mikawa was an only child. Dejected, he tore up the movie tickets once again. That evening, he went home, opened a beer, turned on Daniel C.C. horror movie, and settled in with a newspaper, enjoying the evening news. Suddenly, he realized he was on the news. The report stated that this was his fourth time asking Mikawa out and that he had been rejected every time after the first date. The news detailed how they had met a month ago through a mutual friend. They had their first date at a concert early in the month, but his subsequent invitations to another concert, dinner, and a movie were all rejected. And that, the anchor concluded, was the national news for the day. Morishita was completely baffled. He turned off the TV and searched his apartment, thinking it must be some kind of elaborate prank, but found no evidence. The next day at work, his male colleagues swarmed him, and his female colleagues treated him with unusual warmth. They all wanted to know if this Mikawa was some kind of celebrity, wondering why it was taking him so long to win her over. Morishita's interest was piqued. He asked if they had all seen the news last night. If so, it was unlikely to be a prank, but his colleagues said they had read about it in the newspaper. They handed him one, and Morishita was furious, telling them not to buy such trashy papers. They replied that every single newspaper was covering the story. A sports paper even had it as a front-page headline. Morishita took the paper and saw it was true. His colleague's tone became deferential, asking him what kind of celebrity he was. Morishita was exasperated, declaring he was no celebrity and had no idea why he was suddenly in the news. The conversation was interrupted by his section chief, who had also seen the news and wished him success with Mikawa. Thanks to his boss's good wishes, Morishita actually managed to get a date with Mikawa that night. Her attitude was a complete reversal of her previous standoffishness. She was so pleasant it made him feel a bit overwhelmed. She explained that if she had refused him, she couldn't imagine what the headlines would say, adding she never dreamed a celebrity would ask her out. Morishita tried to explain, but a glance from Mikawa made him notice the paparazzi hiding by the door. At that point, any explanation was futile. The dinner, however, went exceptionally well. After the meal, they walked down the street, and Mikawa leaned in close, giving Morishita a taste of romance. He suggested they go to a hotel for the hormone yoga night. Mikawa feigned modesty, saying they had just met and the paparazzi would find out. They agreed to meet the next day and went their separate ways. That night, however, a TV program aired an emergency debate titled The Future of Morishita and Mikawa's Relationship. Experts from various fields were invited to predict the couple's trajectory. Morishita, enraged, changed the channel, only to find that numerous other channels were also covering his story. One even had a hidden camera in his home, filming him picking his toes. He furiously threw the crew out. A few days later, Morishita was a full-blown celebrity. His and Mikawa's faces were everywhere. Paparazzi followed him whenever he left the house, and people on the street asked for his autograph. As a result, his popularity with women skyrocketed. A model in particular was very interested in him, telling him not to refuse her and to take her somewhere they could be intimate. She then hugged him forcefully. The moment was captured by the paparazzi, leading to Morishita's first tabloid scandal. His pure love image was tarnished. A group of female colleagues, indignant, demanded an explanation, with one pouring fuel on the fire by saying he was cheating on his girlfriend with a model. Morishita was miserable. Being a celebrity was not enjoyable. Because of the scandal, the company was flooded with calls condemning him, damaging its reputation. His section chief was furious and suspended him from all his projects. Utterly dejected, Morishita tried to go home but was mobbed by the media. After a great struggle, he finally escaped. In that moment of freedom, a brilliant idea struck him. Since he was a celebrity now, he should act like one. So Morishita sent out invitations to all the TV stations and newspapers for a press conference announcing his and Mikawa's wedding. He painfully bought a large diamond ring for her and rented a conference room at a hotel. His plan was simple. He was a celebrity now, capable of standing on his own 2 feet. The money he was spending now was a small investment for the huge earnings to come, but his fantasy crumbled. He waited from morning until afternoon, and not a single reporter showed up. As the rental time was about to expire, a waiter came to ask them to leave. Mikawa, seeing this, left without a second thought, warning him not to call her again. Morishita sat in the empty room, crestfallen. He couldn't understand where all the reporters who had been hounding him just yesterday had gone. Just then, a cleaning lady came in to tidy up, followed by the very reporters who had been missing. Morishita's spirits lifted, thinking they had finally come for him. He believed that as long as he was famous, Mikawa would come back. But reality disappointed him again. The reporters were there for the cleaning lady. The next day, the news was filled with trivial stories about her. The story ends there. The 44th story begins with a young man, gravely ill and bedridden, still writing love letters to the girl he adored. He knew he was dying and that this was his last chance. Meanwhile, his crush, May, had just gotten a new typewriter at home. She planned to use it to write a love letter to a senior she admired, but her mother scolded her. Her mother insisted that love letters must be handwritten, stroke by stroke, to be sincere. May paid no attention. While grumbling, her mother handed May another letter addressed to her. For the past 6 months, one had arrived every day without fail. They were handwritten, and even May's mother was moved, remarking that this was what a true love letter looked like. But May was unimpressed, even disgusted. The words "love" dominated the page, but the sender was always anonymous. Compared to this unknown admirer, May was infatuated with a retired tennis star and her ultimate idol. One day, while returning from shopping with her mother, they happened upon the bedridden man's funeral procession. The man's mother had been delivering his letters for the past 6 months, so she recognized May and stared at her intently. The stare made May's skin crawl. Even after they had walked a fair distance, she could still feel the gaze. When she looked back, she thought she saw the bedridden man for a fleeting moment in a second-floor window before he vanished. She dismissed it as a trick of the eye. On their way home, they wondered about the meaning behind the mother's stare. May's clever mother quickly guessed that the bedridden man might have been the one writing the letters. At that moment, she heard a voice warning her of danger. May turned to see a motorcycle speeding towards her. She froze. As they were about to cross the street, they saw a large truck approaching too quickly for them to dodge. May's mother decided to sacrifice herself to save her daughter. May survived, but was left in a wheelchair. One day, looking out her window, she saw her idol. On impulse, she started to write him a love letter. Halfway through, she came to her senses. She felt her current self was unworthy of him. She stopped, turned off the typewriter, and went back to her room. She didn't see that after she left, a gust of wind blew through the room, and the typewriter began to type on its own, composing a letter to her idol. The next day, as May was feeding the birds, her idol arrived. She was thrilled to her smelly butt and was about to open the door when she heard him say he had come because of her mother's letter. May fell silent. Her mother had been dead for 6 months. How could she have written to her idol? Her silence made her idol think he had startled her. He left the flowers and departed. Confused, May went to the typewriter and found a letter she hadn't written. It was written from her mother's perspective, explaining that May had been in love with her idol for a long time and was about to confess when the accident happened. Now, full of self-doubt, she hid at home and avoided her friends. The letter from her mother expressed her worry and asked if the idol would, at his convenience, come to visit May. It was a mother's heartfelt plea, hoping her daughter would find the strength to live again. May was deeply moved. That night, as she slept, a breeze rustled through the room and the typewriter lit up again. A figure could be faintly seen sitting at the desk, typing. It wasn't her mother writing the letter. It was the bedridden man. He wrote that he hoped she would get back on her feet. He didn't mind if her idol was the one to help her do it. He was doing this because he loved her and he would always be there for her, watching over and peeping at her. The 45th story begins with a man working as a section chief at a company. Unlike other managers who effortlessly guided their subordinates, he was constantly being led around by them, buried under an endless pile of work. There's an unwritten rule for Japanese salarymen. No matter how you're doing at work, you must come home slightly drunk, or your wife will look down on you as incompetent. The man was no exception. One night, on his way home, drunk and grumbling, his complaints were interrupted by a dog's bark. He looked at the lavish house and complained that he could work his whole life and never afford such a place. The dog responded to his complaint with a contemptuous fart. Enraged, the man decided to teach the dog a lesson, but he slipped on a can and fell, getting his head stuck between the bars of the fence. When the dog's owner called it back inside, the man ducked his head in shame. A little later, another, much larger dog appeared, frightening him. But this dog was friendly, and after a doggy-style conversation, they became friends. Now the man could comfortably watch its owner dancing inside the house. A short while later, he saw another drunkard in a similar predicament, also stuck in a fence. But this drunkard easily pulled his head out. The man begged the drunkard for help. The drunk agreed, but as he touched the man, he felt his wallet. His professional instincts kicked in. He stole the man's wallet and even stripped off his coat before running away. Now dejected, the man saw a glimmer of hope when a car pulled up. Seeing the professional-looking logo on the vehicle, he thought he was saved. This guy was an expert. Moments later, he realized he was mistaken. The expert slathered his neck with lubricant, then grabbed his hair and pulled with all his might, trying to yank him free. The man felt his life flash before his eyes before the expert gave up. But since he was a professional, he had professional tools: a blowtorch, a chisel, a hammer, a chainsaw, the whole set. When the expert started brandishing these tools, the man panicked, begging the expert to just leave him alone. He was afraid he'd be killed by the rescue before he was freed. The expert, seeing his lack of gratitude, walked off. By now, it was the middle of the night. The man was tired and hungry. His dog friend, sensing this, brought him some dog food. The man was deeply touched, muttering about the coldness of the world and how dogs were better than people. He reflected on his life, his work, his family, and felt like a complete failure. He wondered if his current situation was divine punishment. After some thought, he made a decision. If he could escape from this fence, he would quit his job. He would not live the rest of his life in such a pathetic way. As he was thinking this, he heard a scream. A burglar was in the house. As the thief was leaving, he spotted the man stuck in the fence and decided to silence him. Seeing the thief approach, the man told himself he could not die here. A miracle happened. With a surge of superhuman strength, he stood up, shattering the fence bars. The force of the break sent the thief flying like a giant Barbie toy. The man was free and stunned by his own power. The story ends here. The fence around the man's head was visible, but the invisible fences that trap us in life are not. They bind us, leaving us without joy, money, or time for our parents, partners, and children. Perhaps this is just life. The 46th story begins with Nakaki having a harmonious and loving family. But the more perfect his family seemed, the more distressed he became. His work was the same. Every day he had to deal with much younger female colleagues whose constant chatter irritated him, yet he had to maintain a smile. As a junior manager, he had to be firm and decisive when his subordinates made mistakes and obsequious when facing his superiors. He was physically and mentally exhausted. If it weren't for the personality potion, he would have collapsed under the weight of these social pressures long ago. The only exception was Yoko. She was his confidant, or to put it bluntly, his mistress. Only with Yoko could he be his true self. She was his remedy for exhaustion, his only spiritual refuge. One day, while he was wearily dealing with a client, that same client was secretly hitting on his spiritual refuge. Nakaki didn't notice. His condition was deteriorating. To avoid losing his composure in front of the client, he rushed to the restroom and chugged a bottle of the potion, which temporarily restored him. He didn't know when it started, but the potion's effects were becoming shorter and shorter. A dose that should have lasted an hour now barely lasted 30 minutes. That evening, when he returned to his loving home and faced his gentle wife and well-behaved children, the potion wore off and he exploded, shouting about what there was to be so happy about. His family was stunned, having no idea what was wrong with him. The potion's duration was shrinking rapidly. Sometimes it would wear off before he had even finished with a single client. He had to order 24 packs of Professional Smile potion. When reporting to his boss, the effects would fade halfway through, so he ordered 24 packs of Persuasive Presentation, Inspirational Charisma, and Work is Life potions as well. After several days of this, his condition worsened. When the mentally exhausted Nakaki returned home, he found his son, daughter, and wife acting strangely. Upon questioning them, he learned they had also been taking potions for a long time in order to match him. He realized his harmonious family was a complete sham, and he had been taking that stupid potion every day for nothing. Exhausted, he decided to go to Yoko's place. But Yoko looked disheveled and said it wasn't a good time. He didn't care and pushed his way in, only to discover she was hiding a guy in her shower. He accused her of cheating on him and tried to force the bathroom door open. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Yoko opened it to find a male colleague. The colleague called her an impatient girl, then noticed Nakaki was also there. At that moment, the guy from the shower emerged. It was their company's client. Everyone stared at each other. The colleague, flustered, slipped into his regional dialect and quickly drank a potion. The client, not to be outdone, chugged one too. Nakaki was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand what had happened to the world. How had Yoko turned into a common prostitute overnight? He left the apartment to clear his head, and in his daze, he saw his department head in the hallway holding a bouquet of flowers, also on his way to see Yoko. A huge argument erupted upstairs. At the height of the chaos, his wife and children arrived. His wife downed a bottle of potion and joined the fray. The commotion drew the attention of the entire neighborhood. The next day, the company had changed. Potions became a daily necessity, distributed at regular intervals. Colleagues cheerfully took their doses. Yoko drank a potion to never love again. As for Nakaki, his prescription was reduced to 3 types: Professional Smile, Family Harmony, and Work is Life. The story ends there. The 47th story begins with a project manager on a construction site. A calculation error had caused a project delay, and to make amends, he was working himself to the bone. His fiancée was not happy. His intense work schedule meant he was neglecting her. They were supposed to be getting married, but she was handling everything from renovating their apartment to booking the wedding venue all by herself. Now he was telling her they had to postpone the wedding. They had a huge fight. She angrily took off her ring, declaring the wedding was off. His attempts to stop her were futile, and in the struggle, a framed photo of them shattered. After the fight, he couldn't sleep. Compounded by his recent exhaustion from work, he nearly fainted on the job site. As he felt himself falling from the building, he screamed his fiancée's name in despair. Strangely, after shouting her name, he felt his body float back to its original position. Only the laptop fell. He then passed out. When he woke up, he was in the office. The doctor said it was due to overwork and lack of sleep. After getting up, he told his colleagues and the doctor what had happened, saying he didn't understand how he had floated. Their silent expressions made him think they believed his condition was worse than they thought. When he got home that evening, he found the photo frame that had shattered was mysteriously fixed. His fiancée, having heard about his collapse, had rushed over. Seeing her, he was filled with guilt and began to apologize for the previous night. She, in turn, was very understanding. She said she was the one who should be sorry. She knew his work was stressful and dangerous, yet she had thrown a tantrum. She promised things would be different after they were married. They embraced without a smelly kiss. Later, as she was preparing dinner, she mentioned that she thought she heard him call her name when he fainted, but she dismissed it as her imagination. He wanted to tell her it wasn't, but was interrupted when she dropped some fruit. She stayed the night. He was woken by a nightmare. Looking at his sleeping fiancée beside him, he felt a sense of unreality. The next day, there was good news from the company. The client was no longer pursuing the issue of the delay caused by his mistake. Furthermore, due to a materials shortage, work was suspended for at least 10 days. It was as if everything was being arranged to accommodate his wedding. Ever since his fall, everything had been going smoothly, almost like a dream. Later, while picking up his parents with his fiancée, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He told her that he should have fallen that day, but somehow, after calling her name, his body floated back up, like a video rewinding. She didn't think much of it, saying it was a good thing. He was saved, so why overthink it? Perhaps some deity had intervened just to save him, and he should be enjoying his second chance instead of worrying. He then took her to meet his parents, whom they checked into a hotel. But as the elevator ascended, he began to feel unwell and fainted again. When he came to, he was in the hotel room. He was deeply unsettled. Nothing like this had ever happened to him before. If he had suddenly developed a fear of heights, his career would be over. But he decided to focus on the wedding for now. A few days later, it was their wedding day. Dressed in his finest, he solemnly took his fiancée's hand from her father. They walked together towards the priest to exchange their vows in front of family and friends. However, the moment he took his first step with his left foot, he realized something was terribly wrong. He was plummeting rapidly towards the ground. He realized this was all just a dream. The story ends there. The brief dream fulfilled his final regrets. If he had a real second chance, he probably wouldn't have worked so hard and would have spent more time with his loved ones. The 48th story begins with a school putting on a stage play of Little Red Riding Hood. A young girl named Mimiko practiced her lines diligently at home every day, hoping to be cast as Little Red Riding Hood. However, reality was different. She was cast as the Big Bad Wolf. Mimiko was unhappy and annoyed by the wolf mask. Her mother called her downstairs and scolded her for not cleaning up her toys. After cleaning, she was sent to buy carrots. Mimiko hated carrots, which made her even more irritable. She grumbled that she wished someone could take her place. Grumpily, she bought 2 bunches of carrots. On her way home, she passed a park where another girl was on the swings. The girl saw Mimiko and waved her over. Mimiko approached her. The girl offered to play the role of the wolf for her, claiming she knew all the lines and could even mimic Mimiko's voice. So Mimiko let the girl take her place as the wolf. During the performance, Mimiko watched nervously from the audience. But as the girl had claimed, she was a very good wolf. Her performance was excellent and earned praise from the teacher. When the girl took off the mask on stage, Mimiko was shocked to see that the teacher and students didn't seem to notice the switch. From then on, the girl seemed to completely replace her, chatting with her friends and attending her classes. To her classmates, Mimiko was invisible. Confused, she went to the park. Looking at her reflection in a puddle, she saw that her appearance hadn't changed. But when she returned home, things got stranger. Her own mother didn't recognize her, treating her as one of her daughter's friends. She even called for Mimiko to come downstairs to meet her classmate, and the other girl answered. Mimiko was bewildered. She confronted the girl, saying she had only agreed to let her play the wolf. The girl replied that dinner was curry with lots of carrots, and didn't she hate carrots and cleaning her room? The girl promised to switch back after eating the carrots. But after dinner, when Mimiko told her to leave, the girl changed her mind. She asked where she was supposed to go, declaring that this was her home. The girl insisted she was the real Mimiko, and everyone believed it. Just as Mimiko was about to argue, her father came home. Like her mother, he didn't recognize her. When he left the room, Mimiko tried to confront the girl again, but was stopped. The girl declared that she would be Mimiko from now on. When Mimiko asked who she really was, the girl retorted who she was. Then the girl smugly announced she was going to have cake. Watching her go, Mimiko realized her identity had been stolen. Enraged, she rushed from behind and pushed the girl down the stairs. The girl was gone, and with her, Mimiko's identity. Her parents were weeping over the girl's body, while she, the real Mimiko, stood behind them, completely ignored. At that moment, Mimiko silently vowed that she would learn to eat carrots, keep her room clean, and she wouldn't mind playing the wolf anymore. In the next scene, Mimiko was in the park, on the swings, just like the other girl had been. Another little girl walked by, reciting lines from The Three Little Pigs. Mimiko saw her and waved her over. Presumably, she was about to offer to switch identities with this new girl. The 49th story begins during Japan's Warring States period, when life was harsh for common people. There was an employment agency that found work for people, offering at least enough to eat. One day, a strange man named Toshiba came to the agency. He wasn't looking for a job. He was seeking the way to become a sage. The owner was furious, thinking Toshiba was mocking him, and told him to get lost with his smelly butt. He retorted that if he knew how to become a sage, he wouldn't be running this agency. Toshiba was thrown out but didn't give up. He passed a doctor's clinic and decided to try his luck there. When he asked the doctor, the man was stunned. After a moment, he asked Toshiba why he wanted to become a sage. Toshiba explained that he wanted to achieve immortality to escape suffering and live a peaceful, leisurely life far from human conflict. This, however, was also the doctor's dream. Just as the doctor was about to refuse, his wife emerged. She told Toshiba she knew a way for him to become a sage, but on the condition that he live and work for them. Toshiba was overjoyed and immediately agreed. The next day, he asked the woman for the method. She told him she would, but he had to work for their family for 20 years. During this time, he must be completely obedient and never complain. Her husband was shocked that she would make such an outrageous claim, but Toshiba showed no reluctance. In fact, he was thrilled, even agreeing to work without pay. And so, Toshiba became a free laborer for the doctor's family, chopping wood, cleaning, and doing chores with tireless enthusiasm. The woman was very pleased. News of Toshiba's quest to become a sage spread, and local children started treating him like a fool. Toshiba paid them no mind. His dedication surprised and worried the doctor. What would happen in 20 years when his wife couldn't produce a method to become a sage? The wife reassured him it was impossible. No one would be foolish enough to work for 20 years for free. She guessed he'd last 10 years at most. When he left, they would have gotten years of free labor without having to deliver on their promise. It was a brilliant plan. The woman often praised her own cleverness, feeling proud to be the wife of the town's only doctor. 10 years passed. Toshiba was still there, diligently performing his duties. The two children who had mocked him were now young men, still teasing him about working so hard for no pay and no wife. But Toshiba ignored them, focused on his work. The doctor, however, was now worried that when he and his wife died, Toshiba would inherit their home and money. His wife, however, still didn't believe Toshiba would last another 10 years. Another decade flew by. Toshiba was still faithfully working. The woman no longer had her former confidence. The two children, now grown men, had stopped mocking him and started worrying about his future. But Toshiba was calm. He knew that tomorrow was the 20-year mark. The next day, when he asked the couple for the method to become a sage, their faces fell. But the wife, now an old woman, had a plan. She asked Toshiba if he would do whatever she said. He affirmed that he would. She warned him that if he failed, he would not become a sage, would have to work for them for another 20 years, and would face divine punishment. After he agreed, she told him to climb the pine tree in their yard. Without hesitation, Toshiba began to climb. The old man tried to stop him, but his wife silenced him. She kept urging Toshiba to climb higher and higher. Soon, he reached the very top. The old woman then came up with another challenge. She told him to let go with his right hand. Toshiba obeyed and nearly fell. The old woman was delighted, thinking this was the limit of his obedience. Next, she told him to let go with his left hand, muttering that he would never get their fortune. She kept shouting at him from below. After a long hesitation, Toshiba decided to obey. He let go and fell. The old man couldn't bear to watch and covered his eyes. The old woman, however, stared intently. But after a few moments, there was no sound of impact. They looked up and saw Toshiba floating in midair. He thanked them, saying he had finally become a sage. The old woman collapsed. Seeing him succeed was more painful to her than death. As Toshiba slowly flew away, the story ends. The 50th story begins with Matsumura being an outstanding surgeon. During surgery, he demanded that every instrument from scalpels to hemostats be placed in a specific position so he could grab them without looking. The hospital director approved of his methods, but he had no idea Matsumura had a severe case of obsessive-compulsive organization. While strolling through the hospital grounds with the director, he noticed a bench was crooked and insisted they get up so he could straighten it. By now, Matsumura had been at the hospital for over a month, and he was satisfied to see it gradually conforming to his ideal. He owned a set of expensive medical textbooks from abroad, which he cherished so much that he always wore gloves when reading them. One of his subordinates was a clumsy and untidy young nurse. One day, she took longer than Matsumura's allotted time to retrieve a patient's chart. He was displeased, but she explained that someone had messed up the records room. All the misplaced charts had the same attending physician's name on them, a Dr. Takayama. Furious, Matsumura went to confront him. He tripped over a pile of messy boxes as he entered the office. The director then introduced him to the newly arrived Dr. Takayama. After a brief handshake, Matsumura began tidying the room while the director praised Takayama as a brilliant talent and the future of surgery. After leaving, Matsumura obsessively scrubbed his hands with alcohol swabs. Thus began the partnership between the obsessive organizer and the slob. To maintain harmony, Matsumura completely reorganized the records room. He designed shelves with color-coded rows and columns, transforming the chaotic room into a model of neatness. But a new problem arose. The pink column, for patients whose last names started with Q, was overflowing, while another column was empty. The imbalance bothered him. He wished for some patients with L surnames to arrive, but fate sent only more Qs. As the pink section filled to bursting, his anxiety grew. Back in his office, he discovered someone had looked through his precious books. Worse, they had left indelible smudges on the pages. As he seethed with anger, Takayama walked in and casually admitted he had read the book and found it excellent. When Matsumura asked about the smudges, Takayama nonchalantly replied that the inside was fine and walked away. Takayama didn't understand the profound damage his actions had inflicted on a person with obsessive-compulsive disorder. With one book soiled, the entire set was now useless to Matsumura. In a fit of rage, he decided to throw them all away. Just then, a nurse informed him that a patient's condition had worsened and he was dying. Matsumura retorted that it was just one patient, whereas this was a complete 20-volume set. The nurse had to drag him to the patient's room. But upon arrival, Matsumura began rearranging objects instead of treating the patient. The Q-surnamed patient died. Matsumura felt no grief, only relief that a space had opened up in that column. Then he noticed something horrifying. A pink chart had been placed in the wrong section, ruining the order. It was unforgivable. He saw the attending physician was, once again, Takayama. Matsumura flew into a rage, determined to teach him a lesson. But just then, Takayama collapsed with severe abdominal pain and was rushed into surgery. Matsumura was the surgeon. He was reluctant to operate, but then he realized this was a gift from fate. Takayama's last name began with A, not L, but his first name was a different letter, and a new file would be created. This was the first patient for a new section. What was supposed to be a minor ulcer surgery became a complete gastrectomy. Seeing the pink files gradually diminish, Matsumura finally smiled. But then a nurse informed him that a bus carrying a baseball team had overturned and 9 people needed emergency surgery. His first question was about their names. Upon learning they all belonged in the pink column, he rushed to the hospital entrance and, despite the nurse's protests, turned away all the arriving patients. He watched them leave with a deep sigh of relief. His relief was short-lived. A nearby high-end restaurant had a food poisoning outbreak, flooding the records room with a new wave of pink files. Matsumura couldn't take it anymore. He pushed a nurse aside, tore up the patient charts, and destroyed the records. That night, armed with a scalpel, he went to the patient's rooms and began a large-scale cleanup. The 51st story begins with Mina inviting her friend Lady Bro to go sing karaoke. But the moment Lady Bro arrived, she was reminded of her ex-boyfriend. The sad songs she sang brought down the mood. Mina interrupted her, saying this wasn't right. They were there to have fun, not to cry. Besides, her ex-boyfriend had died in an accident 3 years ago. Why couldn't she move on? To lighten the atmosphere, Mina sang an upbeat song. On the karaoke screen, an image flickered of Mina winning big at a casino. Then it was Lady Bro's turn. Mina forbade her from singing sad songs, but love songs were fine. They took turns singing for a long time. As they were leaving, a staff member handed each of them a coupon. Lady Bro tried to look at it, but Mina snatched it and stuffed it in her bag. As they hurried away, they missed the staff member's eerie smile. In the taxi home, Mina discovered a large amount of cash in her bag. Confused but pleased, she quietly kept it. The same thing happened to Lady Bro, but instead of cash, she found a large, expensive-looking gemstone ring. Both were happy with their unexpected windfalls and were in high spirits at work the next day. Their boss was having an affair with Mina. She tried to invite him for a muscle wrestling match on her bed that night, but he pretended not to see her. Mina was furious. She complained to Lady Bro that he cared more about his wife, whose birthday it was, and had ignored her invitation. To cheer her up, Lady Bro suggested they go back to the same karaoke place that night. Mina readily agreed. This time, however, it was Mina who sang the sad songs. Suddenly, Lady Bro noticed something strange on the screen. It showed a family of 3 celebrating a birthday. She recognized the man. It was their boss. An intruder burst in, terrifying the man and woman. In a critical moment, the man abandoned his wife and fled. The intruder then killed the woman. The scene cut to the mysterious figure. Even with a mask on, Lady Bro instantly recognized her as Mina. The next day they heard the news. Their boss's wife had been murdered by an unknown assailant the previous night. Everyone was speculating about who the boss might have angered. Lady Bro pulled Mina aside and told her what she had seen. Mina panicked, insisting she had done nothing. To find out the truth, Lady Bro went back to the karaoke place alone. It was before opening hours and the hallway was dark. Suddenly, music started playing from one of the rooms, drawing her in. As she entered, the door shut automatically behind her. Then something strange happened. On the screen, she saw herself and her boyfriend from 3 years ago. He was still alive then, and they were happy. Lady Bro, who already missed him deeply, became even more sorrowful. She watched the screen as her boyfriend got into a motorcycle accident. At that moment, only one thought filled her mind. She should have died with him 3 years ago. Then the terrifying thing happened. Lady Bro was pulled into the television screen, transported back 3 years to the scene of the accident, and just as she wished, she joined her boyfriend in death. A little later, Mina arrived looking for her, but the room was empty except for Lady Bro's bag. Remembering what Lady Bro had told her, Mina instinctively looked at the screen. There she saw the image of Lady Bro and her boyfriend lying together. The story ends there. The 52nd story begins with Takashima being a section chief who loved to drink. He would often drag his colleagues out for drinks, get blackout drunk, and end up sleeping on the street. The next day, he'd do it all over again. His male colleagues were used to it, but the female staff had a complaint. He never invited them. They insisted he should occasionally include the female employees. Left with no choice, Takashima took 3 of his female colleagues out. After drinking, they went to sing karaoke. Trying to avoid any inappropriate behavior, he kept pushing away the 3 women who were playfully clinging to him. Somehow, in his attempt to be proper, he ended up in a hotel room. The room was a complete mess, a clear sign of a wild night. When Takashima sobered up, he panicked. He had no memory of what had happened or with whom. As he was about to leave, he found a note on the table saying she left first and she would never forget last night's beautiful memory. He recognized the handwriting was one of the 3 female colleagues. He was filled with remorse. He went to work as usual. His male colleagues were whispering, clearly aware of something. When he approached, they quickly dispersed. The female colleagues looked at him with what seemed like resentment. This wouldn't do. He decided to talk to the exact female colleague and explained that he couldn't remember anything last night. Feeling cheated, she just said he was awful. Takashima was devastated and resolved to drink less. As he was leaving, he ran into his department head who asked him to attend a business dinner on his behalf. Having just decided to quit drinking, Takashima tried to refuse, but his boss wouldn't let him, stating that entertaining clients was a crucial part of the job. Takashima had no choice but to go. During the dinner, he was very restrained, trying to avoid alcohol, but the client was not pleased and insisted he accompany him to a bar afterward. Unable to refuse, Takashima complied. It's worth noting that because he knew about his memory loss problem, Takashima had hired a private investigator to follow him and record his actions after work every night. This way, he could see what he had done while drunk. The next morning, he woke up in a pile of trash again. At the office, his boss yelled at him, meaning he must have done something terrible to the client after getting drunk, but he had no idea what. He was furious. That night, he drank heavily again, constantly complaining about his boss. The private investigator was, of course, following him. He ran into another man who was also cursing his own boss. It turned out this man was also a section chief. The two men, kindred spirits, instantly bonded and went off to drink together. The next day, however, Takashima woke up in a forest. His body was covered in injuries. While berating himself for getting drunk again, he looked around and tripped over something. It was a person, the man he had gone drinking with the night before. But he was now cold and dead. Takashima was terrified. He couldn't remember what had happened. Looking at his own injuries, his mind raced, wondering if he killed this man. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became, and he ran. Meanwhile, at the office, his colleagues received a package from the private investigator containing a videotape. Curious, they played it. It showed everything Takashima had done from the moment he left the office the previous night. They watched him entertain the client and then, in his drunken state, play pranks on him. At the same time, Takashima was hiding in an abandoned warehouse, feeling his life was over. Suddenly, he remembered the investigator's tape. He found a payphone and called his office. He learned they were watching the tape at that very moment. He immediately hung up, convinced they had seen him kill the man. What he didn't know was that he hadn't killed him. They had been attacked by thugs and the man had been accidentally killed by them. But Takashima couldn't remember. To escape punishment, he decided to end his own life. Before he did, he found some alcohol hidden in the warehouse. He drank a bottle to build up his courage, thinking that death would be the ultimate way to quit drinking. And so, in that warehouse, Takashima ended his short and shameful life. The 53rd story begins at 7:15 a.m. when an alarm blared and a young man sat up in bed. He washed his face, greeted his father, and asked his mother what was for breakfast. But something was wrong. His parents were frozen in place as if someone had pressed pause. He didn't understand. He went upstairs to ask his sister, but when he opened her door, she too was motionless, caught in the act of changing clothes. The young man was completely baffled. Her pose couldn't possibly be fake. He rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. The people outside were also frozen. Shocked, he ran downstairs and saw that everyone on the street was motionless. But the clocks were still ticking. Only the people were still. He turned on the TV. All live broadcasts were frozen, while recorded programs played normally. He tried to call his best friend, but as expected, the call wouldn't connect. Just then, he heard a car speed past his house. Without thinking, he ran outside and chased it. After a long pursuit, the car stopped. Two people in work uniforms got out, looking at him with surprise. The young man asked them what was going on, but they ignored him. Instead, they seemed puzzled as to why he could move. They wondered if there was a signal problem, but that didn't make sense, since all other areas were frozen. They decided to contact their headquarters. They continued to ignore him, looking at him not as a person, but as an object. One of them, checking a work report, muttered that he'd never seen an accident like this before, and that this model wasn't on the replacement schedule. The more they talked, the more confused the young man became, but they paid him no mind, which infuriated him. They received instructions from headquarters. They didn't know what was happening either, but they were to bring him back for inspection. They tried to drag him to their vehicle, but he struggled and managed to escape. He ran down the main road with the two men pursuing him in their car. He thought he had lost them, but when he turned a corner, he saw several more people in the same uniforms. They were loading a woman onto a truck and unloading an identical woman to take her place. Terrified, he kept running. The workers then received a message from headquarters to stop the pursuit. They would try a system reboot in 5 minutes. The time was now 8:55 a.m. The young man ran to the busiest part of the city and looked at all the frozen people, feeling a sense of despair. He ran and shouted, asking if anyone was there. Of course, no one answered. Then, at exactly 9 a.m., everything rebooted. And this time, it was the young man's turn to stand frozen in place. The story ends there. The 54th story begins with a legend saying when a person is born, a flame of life is lit. When that flame goes out, the person dies. One day, Okamoto was dragged to a shrine by his girlfriend. She lit 2 candles and said that after placing them before the deity and blowing them out, they would commit suicide together so no one could keep them apart. But when it was Okamoto's turn to blow, his girlfriend had a change of heart. She started complaining about why he hadn't mentioned marrying her when he met her father. Okamoto felt wronged, saying he had wanted to, but the look her father gave him, a look of pure contempt, had stopped him. Okamoto wasn't young, but he had accomplished nothing in his life, which made him feel inadequate. He was afraid her father would reject him, so he didn't dare ask. His girlfriend was furious, calling him a spineless coward. In her anger, she blew out the candle that represented Okamoto. That night, Okamoto drank alone at home, his mind consumed by the fight. He felt his girlfriend was right to be angry. He really was a useless man. He thought that a failure like him might as well be dead. As he lay in bed, he saw a terrifying figure in his room. The figure introduced himself as the Grim Reaper, explaining that he had sensed Okamoto's strong desire to die and had come for him. However, upon arrival, he found that Okamoto's time was not yet up. He still had some years left, so he would return later. With that, he vanished. A few days later, Okamoto met his girlfriend by the sea. They talked about marriage again, and it led to another fight. He told her marriage wasn't something you could just decide on a whim. He then tried to kiss her using his juicy tongue, but she was still angry and pushed him away. Rejected, Okamoto got out of the car, declared he was breaking up with her, and started walking back. Once he was out of her sight, hidden in the tall grass, he let out a fake scream, pretending to have fallen off a cliff. This terrified his girlfriend, who frantically rushed down to find him. Seeing her reaction, Okamoto was secretly pleased. It proved she still loved him. A moment later, he heard his girlfriend scream. His heart sank. He ran towards the sound and found her at the bottom of the cliff, unconscious. He rushed her to the hospital, but her injuries were severe and her life was in danger. Most terrifying of all, Okamoto saw the Grim Reaper in her hospital room. He panicked and rushed into the operating room, trying to move his girlfriend away from the Reaper, but it was futile. As a last resort, he held her hand and prayed for her to survive, even offering his own life in exchange. After a long time, the Grim Reaper disappeared, and his girlfriend began to show signs of waking up. Okamoto was overjoyed, thinking he had actually succeeded. His happiness was short-lived. He turned to find the Grim Reaper standing behind him. The next thing he knew, they were in a cave filled with candles of varying lengths. The Reaper explained that each candle represented a person's lifespan. When the candle burned out, the person's life was over. His job was to watch the candles and collect the souls of those whose flames had been extinguished. He then led Okamoto to a very long candle and said it belonged to his girlfriend. Okamoto was ecstatic. Such a long candle meant she would live a long life. He knelt and thanked the Reaper profusely. But the Reaper told him his celebration was premature. That long candle was originally Okamoto's. But because his heartfelt prayer had moved the underworld, they had made a switch. Now, the short, flickering candle next to the long one was his. Okamoto looked and saw a candle so fragile it seemed a sneeze would put it out. Looking at it, he was filled with a mix of emotions. He would probably regret it. He was still young and had so much left to do, including marrying his girlfriend. But he knew that if he could do it all over again, he would make the same choice. After all, he loved her. As long as she was happy, that was all that mattered. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.